Hey guys, welcome to this very special and I think fun episode of TFL Talkin Cars because today we're going all electric, Tommy.
That's right, but we are going all electric on a budget. What are we talking about?
We're talking about the top 10 electric car bargains, and we're not talking about new ones because they're expensive. We're talking about the ones that started out as like California compliance cars and now have kind of spread their way into the rest of the country. So if you're looking for an electric car, perhaps as your second car or perhaps as a car to use as a commuter to work, these are good choices. And then the great thing about them, Tommy, is they're bargains. Sit back and relax or keep driving if you're driving. TFL Talkin Cars is on the air, the world's most popular car podcast. Okay, maybe not yet, but we're working on it.
You know what I call these cars?
What do you call them?
Dinky EVs.
So not compliance cars, dinky. Why dinky EVs?
Because they're dinky. Because most people look at them and they just write them off for being useless and, old and they don't go far enough. But these are actually some truly brilliant cars that can be had for, in some cases, well under $10,000. Now, here's my theory, right? A lot of households in the U.S. have multiple cars.
Yeah.
2, sometimes even 3 cars may not be uncommon.
Yeah.
Now, as an everyday car, the vehicles on this list are probably okay unless you're commuting. But for a second car, that's where these really shine. So, for example, if someone in your household has a long commute, they drive the primary car, be it some big SUV or something. But if you have a need for a second car, that's where these EVs come in because they go plenty far enough for running around town. They are super cheap to run. They are typically dead reliable. They're great for taking kids to school. They're great if you have a kid and they need to drive to school. They're just really, really good values, and there's a ton of engineering that went into them that has just been completely depreciated away.
Yeah, most of these actually are under $10K. A bunch of them we've owned, but really the brilliance of electric cars. And I would say these are actually great cars even if you're using them as your primary car, as long as you're willing to charge them up every night. But the brilliance of them, Tommy, is that there's no real maintenance on them, right? There's no oil to change. There's no coolant to flush. Actually, the brakes last forever because a lot of them have regen braking, so you're not actually spending a lot of time on the brakes. So the brakes last, I would say, at least twice as long as on a regular car. The only thing you got to put in them really is, windshield wiper fluid, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Some people will tell you you have to change the coolant because they've got radiators on them, and but it's so minimal. I mean, there's no
oil.
Most of these cars have
no transmission fluid.
Most of these cars have moving parts in the single digits. Yeah. So where a gas car may have 300 moving parts, an EV may have 7 or 6.
Yeah, so that's the upside. The downside, of course, is that over time batteries do tend to lose some of their capacity. The good news is on most of these cars, you can actually check how much capacity they have, and some actually are still under factory warranty, like the Nissan Leaf, for instance, I think gives you an 8-year warranty on their batteries.
And I read,
even though it's not on our list.
It is on our list.
Is it? You put it on there?
Yeah, I read so many comments about how these cars are terrible because the batteries just destroy themselves.
Yeah.
That is such an overstated problem on so many cars. There are a couple models where it's a big problem, we'll talk about. But for 90% of the used EVs out there, the battery capacities, even after tens of thousands of miles, are typically pretty much on par, if not, a tiny bit off of what they were when they were new.
Yeah, and then, we've been doing, like I say, a lot of shopping for EVs because we think they're the future, or we know they're the future. And so we want to get in on that on the ground floor, or at least as down to the ground floor as we can get. And so we've done a lot of research looking at, battery life, how quickly they recharge. And there's a lot to electric cars that, like with an electric car, there are all these numbers and metrics that people find very unfamiliar, right? Like kilowatt hours and charge rates and amps, but it's not that hard, right? It's just getting your brain used to working in those numbers versus gallons and MPG.
It's very simple. It really is super simple.
It's really simple. So before we get to the list, why don't we talk about that? So let's talk about battery capacity. Let's start with that. That's the biggest thing. Basically, battery capacity in a way translates to the size of your engine. Right? In some ways, because the more battery capacity, usually the more powerful the vehicle is,
I would say,
and the longer the range.
I would say it translates to the size of your
fuel tank?
Yeah, directly to the size of your fuel tank. So think of a kilowatt hour like a gallon.
Yeah.
So, for example, most of these vehicles we talk about in terms of, be it 20, 25, 30 kilowatt hours. And basically a kilowatt hour is just a unit of energy. So it's how long can I expel kilowatts before that battery is drained. So for example, if I have a 30 kilowatt hour battery pack and I'm drawing 1 kilowatt, the battery will last 30 hours. So it really is, it's a really simple thing, but the basics of it are the higher the kilowatt hours, the further your vehicle can go.
And usually the quicker it'll go, too. It's faster from 0 to 60 because you can use more power to generate quicker speeds because you've got more power in reserve.
I tend to disagree because like the Pikes Peak race car, that a Volkswagen ID, that set the record that still holds as the fastest car.
But you can't talk about a race car.
But that had a tiny battery.
Yeah, because it only had to go up, a 12-mile stretch of road. So they wanted as much lightweight as possible in that car, and so they gave it just enough battery to make it up the mountain.
I mean, think of it about it like in the RC world. You can have a tiny battery or you can have a big battery, but typically it'll still go the same speed from 0 to 20 miles an hour in the RC world. It just won't do it as many times.
I don't want to get into a big argument, but the bigger the battery, the more expensive the vehicle. I think that's fair to say because you're paying for the battery. Now, the other important number that you have to talk about is charge rate, right?
Yeah, so charge rate is also measured in something called kilowatts. So kilowatts and kilowatt hours are directly related, perhaps no surprise there. But once again, the higher the kilowatts, the faster your vehicle will charge. Now, let's put this in perspective. There are 3 levels of charging. So level 1 is basically your home wall outlet. So it's like what you charge your iPhone with. That is typically, depending on the amps, but that's like 1.7, 1.8 kilowatts. Is typically what we draw at home. Level 2 is a dryer outlet. So it's 240 volts, and that's typically, 6.7 to maybe 10, 13 kilowatts. And then we have something called DC fast charging, and that is no longer AC but DC. That's like those stations you'll see.
Direct current.
Yeah, Tesla's plugged into. That's like Electrify America. DC fast chargers are typically anywhere between like 25 and 350 kilowatts.
Yeah, and the faster it charges, the bigger that number. So basically, 200 or 300 kilowatt hour charger charges a lot quicker. Now, the one caveat that we have to talk about is when you're talking charging up to about 80% of the battery's capacity because that's where it can charge quickly. The last 20%, it slows down a lot. So if you were to graph it, when you plug the vehicle and it's completely empty, you're getting all that power, and then as you get to 80%, the curve starts to go down, 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 and it takes longer and longer and longer. So most people on fast charging do not charge at 100%. They charge at 80%.
And when it comes to these numbers, once again, it sounds confusing, but let's keep it really simple. It never works like this in the real world. But to put it in perspective, a 20 kilowatt hour battery charging at 20 kilowatts should take 1 hour to charge. But like you said, there's all sorts of curves to take into account.
So what does that mean in the real world? So if you buy an electric car, and I'm not even going to talk about battery size. I don't want to get confused. But for the most part, if you buy an electric car and if you plug it into that wall outlet, it's going to take more than overnight to plug it. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
If you have the dryer outlet, you can charge pretty much any electric car overnight.
Yeah.
From 0.
I mean, in a dryer outlet on most of these will be like 4 to 6 hours.
Level 2, yeah. So you'll charge it overnight.
So every vehicle on our list is capable of charging off of a dryer outlet.
Yep.
So level 1 and level 2. Level 3 is where things get interesting. Not every vehicle on this list can actually use one of those public chargers. But those will take, typically, the manufacturer either likes to say 30 minutes to 80% or 1 hour to 80%, depending on the car. And we can talk about that.
And then because we're in the early days of electric cars, there are really basically 3 different standards for charging. Tesla has its own proprietary standard, so a Tesla is its own thing. And with a Tesla, you can charge a Tesla off of like a public charger that runs what's called CCS.
CHAdeMO.
Or CHAdeMO, right? They're different.
I've never seen a CCS to Tesla adapter. Maybe it's out there. Someone will let me know in the comment section below. But
there are adapters. So Tesla can charge from its own proprietary or from the public charging networks. But Tesla is proprietary to itself, so you can't take, let's say, a Bolt or a Leaf and charge it on a Tesla charger. Only Teslas can charge on Tesla chargers. And then, of course, Nissan, for some reason, they were early to the game. They were one of the first, uses a charging standard called CHAdeMO. Do you know what that stands for? Look it up, would you? It stands for something really funny. It's a hilarious acronym, and I knew it like 2 days ago, and I've forgotten it since then. So look up what CHAdeMO stands for. It's really funny, actually. It sounds stupid, but it's not. There's a reason why it's called CHAdeMO. And it's a Japanese standard, basically.
Charge de move.
No.
Yeah, that's CHAdeMO is an abbreviation of charge de move, equivalent to move using charge. There you go. So CHA comes from charge, DE, and then move is the MO.
Okay, I thought it was something else.
Yeah, CHAdeMO, exactly.
Anyway, that's the standard that Nissan uses for the most part, and then there's the other standard everybody else uses, which is CCS.
So the thing that you need to remember, I think we made it way too complicated.
We really confused the heck out of these people.
It's very simple.
Sorry, guys.
Every car except for Tesla uses the same plug when it comes to charging at home on 120 or 240.
Which is what? What's that stand?
Called the J1772 plug.
CCS, right?
No, it's a plug that every automaker uses.
I thought that was called CCS.
Nope, that's the CCS is the combined plug.
Okay.
So every car uses the 1772 plug.
Right.
That's what you'll find at
home.
Then
CCS is the.
And then the automakers then expanded on the 1772 plug and created a combined plug, which is called CCS. So the top portion of that plug is a standard 1772, and the bottom portion have these two prongs for the DC fast charging cable.
So if you're out there buying an electric car, what you want is ideally is that top and bottom part. So you want those two big plugs for the fast charging, the direct charging, and then you want the round one on top for, if it's not a Tesla, for regular charging.
Yeah.
That's ideal.
Or if you have a Leaf, you'll have your standard home plug, and then you'll have this big, ugly, scary thing, which is what we call the CHAdeMO. But that works too. All right, should we go down the list?
Yeah, so let's start with number 10 now that we've completely and thoroughly confused you.
Yeah, number 10 is called the Chevrolet Spark EV. So this was a vehicle that is largely a California compliance car. Basically, it was a vehicle designed for the California market so that Chevy could keep selling its big, crazy pickup trucks with monstrous V8s. But it actually turned out to be a really, really interesting little car. It's based on the Spark, which is a small front-wheel drive commuter. They ripped out the four-cylinder gas engine, and in its place, they put a super stinking powerful electric motor.
Yeah. So I was at the Detroit Auto Show when this debuted, and I was kind of walking by, and back then, back in the day, what year was the first year of this?
14.
So back in the day, I was not that interested in electric cars, but I'm walking by this, it's debuting, and I'm kind of doing a double take because all of a sudden there's a car doing a front-wheel drive burnout on stage.
Yeah.
Which was crazy. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And for some reason, the one you want is a 2014 because that was the year that the vehicle had the most torque I've ever actually seen put through an electric car's front wheels, which is, 400 pound-foot of torque or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It was 400 pound-feet of torque.
It's a lot of torque.
And then they built them for several years after that, but starting in 15, they downgraded the torque to, I think, 328, and that's
made it
because
more sane.
Yeah, well, they changed the batteries. So none of these vehicle manufacturers actually make their own batteries. They purchase the batteries from suppliers like LG.
Yep.
And Chevrolet was purchasing their batteries from a company called A123. And A123 was based out of the USA. They also supplied batteries for the Fisker.
And they went bankrupt.
And then starting in 2015, I think they went to the LG batteries.
So the one you want is a 2014. It's pretty much, just a hot little hatch. What's the range on it, Tommy?
82 miles, according to the EPA.
Yeah, and, figure in 5 years, that's probably down. Graded a little bit. It's degraded, but not a lot. Maybe instead of 82 now, you're probably going to get like 75, something like that, after 5 years.
I don't even think you'd lose that much.
Yeah.
I really don't. Reading what owners have to say about the Spark, especially the LG batteries, they've lasted really, really well. They've held up really well. So the cool thing about the Spark, believe it or not, it was the first vehicle sold in the U.S. with CCS fast charging.
That's pretty darn cool. I thought the iMe was first.
That was Chatamo.
Chatamo. All right. And it also had this cool, almost like lightning bolt design in the seats. So they kind of, went with the electricity theme throughout the interior of the thing. If I were to get one, they're like, what? Well, we can look it up. How much are they?
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is, if you're watching on YouTube, I have pulled up Auto Trader, and we are going to look at some of the prices for every one of these vehicles.
I'm going to take a guess. Okay, I'm going to guess, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
How's that?
Yep.
I'm going to say a first-gen Spark from 2014 is like $7,000 right now.
Ooh, spot on. 7 to 8, depending on where you find them. They're all pretty much low mileage. You'd be hard pressed to find one over 60,000 miles.
Yeah, the thing is, you're not road tripping in these cars, so people weren't exactly driving them to visit grandma in Florida if they lived in Colorado.
Probably not. No. I think that's a fair assessment. Once again, these cars don't have a lot of range, so they typically don't have very high mileage, and there's very little to break.
And I think it's important to say, as we're heading into winter, that you also lose range when the batteries get cold.
That's right.
So what's going to hurt you more than actually the degradation of the battery over time is the degradation of the battery when it gets cold. So in some of these vehicles, you could lose up to 20, 25% of that capacity in cold places like Colorado.
So apart from having 400 pound-feet of torque, the Spark can also seat your family. It's a proper 4-seater or 4-door with the rear hatch. It was also really expensive when it was new, somewhere around $30,000.
It's a little ugly, Tommy.
It's good.
It kind of got hit with the ugly stick.
It's the ultimate sleeper. GM said 0 to 60 in under 8 seconds.
You know what it reminds me of? Like a turtle with a head that's poking out that's just one size too small.
That's fine. You will be in your Golf GTI. I will pull up next to you in my 14 Spark, and I will smoke you from the line.
This is true.
Yep.
You also burn those front tires off pretty quickly.
Luckily, they're tiny.
What was the 0 to 60 on it?
Sub 8 seconds.
Yeah, which is fast.
Which is really fast, considering the standard Spark was, 11 or something.
Now, I got to tell you, the next car on my list, I'm looking over my shoulder at our list, is actually probably my favorite of these. And I think at some point we will own one of these. I actually got to go on the launch of this car, and it was such a hoot to drive. And it was like this car, Tommy, is exactly what you want in an Italian car, because let's face it, Italian cars have the reputation of not being very reliable. Well, this car solves all that. So what is it?
Yeah, it's the Fiat 500e. Really cool car. Came out, and I think it was 2013 was the first year. Once again, they took the quirky little Fiat 500, they electrified it, they gave it these weird little dimples on the front end, these baseball or golf ball dimples. You could get
Make it aerodynamic.
Yeah, crazy colors. It had funky wheels, but it was also really quick, super fun to drive. 84 miles according to the EPA, 111 horsepower motor, torque was way off the scale. 24 kilowatt hour battery, and it was just a real hoot. I think this is so much better than the gas versions. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I would even probably buy it over in an Abarth. Same car. It's just it takes the 500, which is a charming little car, and it makes it bulletproof, and it makes it fun. The range wasn't great, if I recall. What was the range? Do you have the range?
It was 84 miles. It was okay.
It was okay. So I'd recommend the orange. The orange is kind of like an orange sickle color with the white. That's a really cool color combination. And it's just got European, Italian flair written all over it. You feel like you're kind of in some coffee bar in Italy when you're driving the thing. You just want to grab a cigarette and an espresso and yell "Ciao bella" out the window.
Yeah, just look at it. It's adorable. It really is. If you're watching on YouTube, a cool little car. I think Fiat said back in the day it was quicker from 0 to 30 than the sporty, crazy, racy Abarth version. And it's going to feel quicker, especially nowadays, because the Abarth's going to have all sorts of issues and turbo problems, and the little 500e is just going to keep cranking along. Battery degradation doesn't seem to be a huge issue with the 500e. It only had level 1 or level 2 charging, so you can't charge it up to full in 30 minutes. The fastest is probably going to be 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, let me repeat that again. If you don't mind charging it up overnight, you're going to be fine with this car. It's when you kind of go past its range and you have to go, let's say, from work and stop at the dry cleaner and get some groceries, and those are out of your way. Then that's when you're going to get a little bit of range anxiety, because even though it has 80-some miles, right, let's face it, those last 10 miles don't really count, because those are kind of like the little light on the gas gauge, right? You're into the reserve at that point, and you're feeling really stressed and really worried because you know that if you do run out of power, you're not going to like push it to a gas station and fill it up.
You know, I've driven that smart EV we have a lot.
Yes.
That only has 68 miles of range.
Yes.
Not once have I felt range anxiety.
I have.
I have not. You just get used to it. It's like driving around with the quarter tank all the time, except when you wake up in the morning, it's always full. And I drive it a lot, you know, in the city.
You do drive it a lot, yeah.
We
call it Tweety.
Even 50 or 60 miles, you know, you think when you're under that 10% that you're going to worry about it.
Yeah.
You just get used to it. It's fine.
I don't get used to it because I think to myself, I got to make a meeting at 4 o'clock and I'm running out to lunch and I don't know if I'll be able to make it back. And then what will I do? How embarrassing will it be? Who do I call?
You're fine.
No,
just
these
for
are all things I think people feel.
Just plan for it.
You don't plan for range anxiety. It's like you don't plan on having like a fear of heights.
It's like
it's just built into our
it's
DNA.
like any other anxiety. If you do it enough, you totally get used to it. It's not a problem. I didn't like heights when I was little. I hated roller coasters, and then I just started going on roller coasters.
Below if you think Tommy is
now I love
right
him.
About that.
Everyone's going to agree with you, but everybody's wrong because it's really easy to get used to.
Yeah.
So number 8 on our list, believe it or not, we didn't look at the prices. How much do you think the 500e goes for?
I think it'd be the same. Like they're between 6 on the cheap side and maybe 9 on the expensive side, depending on where you get them.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Here in Auto Trader, 64, 67.
Yeah.
This is, of course, going ascending. But look at the mileage, like 19,000 miles, 35,000 miles.
The thing is, they're just, both of these cars that we've just talked about are pretty tiny inside. So let's face it, I mean, they're 4-seaters, but you wouldn't want to put 4 people in them unless, you were in an emergency situation. Being in the backseat of a Fiat 500e is not my idea of Partyville.
Okay, so the next vehicle on our list is...
I would get in the backseat.
The next vehicle on our list is the Model S.
Yeah, I'd definitely get in the backseat of that.
And this is interesting because Model S's are known for being, really expensive. You can get a performance for over $100,000 now. But they're getting old. So the Model S came out, and I think it was 2012 was the first model year.
It's the second oldest Tesla, right? The Roadster is the first, and then the Model S. So there's a lot... Not a lot, but they're they've been around a long time now, so they're actually Teslas don't depreciate anywhere near the amount that the rest of these cars do, and that's because Teslas always from the get-go have had at least 200 miles of range, right? Even like a P60, which is a very low, small battery Model S, has a lot more range than any of these other cars. And I think, like real estate is about location, location, location. Electric cars are about range. And the Tesla has it. So they don't depreciate much, but they've been around long enough now where you can actually get a Tesla Model S relatively affordably.
Well, that's what we're talking about. So once again, it's all about battery capacity. Most Model S's have, 80, maybe 90, maybe 100 kilowatt-hour batteries, but they did a version called the Model S 60, and that had a 60 kilowatt-hour battery, allegedly. They sold it from 2013 to 2015. Still really quick, 0 to 60 in 5.5. Still over 200 miles of EPA-rated range, 208. And the cool thing is if you buy one of these cars, you can actually make it better. So 60 kilowatt hours is actually software limited. So they had a 75 kilowatt hour battery. But then Tesla, because you paid less, they software limited you to 60. But you can actually pay them $9,500, and they will unlock the rest of the battery.
Whoa. You can pay them the cost of a Spark or a Fiat 500e.
I'm not saying you should.
To get, 10 more kilowatt hours of battery, or 15?
15, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a wise, or something I would do. I'd get the 500e and keep the money.
The crazy thing about the Model S60 is that they really haven't changed that much. So a 2013 is still going to look pretty much identical on the inside to a brand new one. You're still going to have that huge screen.
Yeah, you look at all those perks.
Some of them don't have autopilot. I'm not sure that all of them even had the ability to supercharge. So you have to look into that. But
they will supercharge, but just not as quickly. You can plug them into a supercharger.
Well, I'm not even sure that some of them will supercharge.
I think the supercharger network was being built out.
It was, but it was an option. For some of the cars back in the day,
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find one that doesn't supercharge.
Yeah, but then the one you buy is, of course, going to be the one.
I'm just saying that the supercharging rate might be much slower. Because
someone in the comments will let us know below, but I'm almost positive that they didn't supercharge. So, they did the Tesla Model S 45, which was a software-limited version of this. That one didn't supercharge at all. You couldn't plug it into a supercharger.
Well, I'm just saying, get the one that can supercharge. And the issue with the speed of the supercharger is not how fast the supercharger can put out power. It's how fast a car can charge the battery. So the charger is actually that cable is just a cable. It's a smart cable, but it's a cable. But the charger is actually built into the car. And so the older cars have slower chargers. So just because a supercharger may be capable of 250 kilowatts, right, that doesn't mean the car can absorb that much power. And the older ones certainly can't. So they're not going to charge as quickly. Like any technology, like any phone, that's probably the best analogy, right? The old phones were smaller, had less memory, had less computing power, took longer to charge, couldn't do remote charging or wireless charging. So you are losing some of the newest and greatest features of electric cars. But nevertheless, I think those things are going for what, 25 to 35 now.
We'll look at it in a second. Yeah. But I'm just reading on the forum, and I think I was right. The early ones you can't supercharge.
He's got to prove me wrong.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I think
you got to prove me wrong.
Someone out there is going to buy one, and they're going to be super bummed out when they go to a supercharger.
You just want to prove me wrong. All right.
Okay. What do you think they cost?
25 to 35.
Yeah, you're right. You are right.
Yeah.
All right, next up on the list, the BMW i3.
Which we just purchased. We purchased the 2014 with the range extender. You can get, for most of the i3s, they had fast charging. Ours unfortunately didn't, but I kind of look at either or. So either get the one with the range extender or get the one that fast charges, because they both do the same thing. They both keep you going and keep you going quicker. The difference, of course, being range extenders, and I know the prices of these very well, go for about $2,000 more than the non-range extended ones. And what's a range extender? It's a little Kimco, I think it's a 600cc motorcycle engine, right?
Something
Kimco's
like
a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And basically what it does is, once the battery gets down to, in America, 7% or 6% of capacity, it jumps on and then it charges the battery, so you can go another, it's like 50 to 70 miles depending on how you've been driving. So a gas station or home to charge it up.
They've been making them for 6 years now. The early ones...
Sorry, they just built the 200,000th i3.
The early ones have a 22 kilowatt-hour battery. Then they went to a 33 kilowatt-hour battery, and the newer ones have a 42 kilowatt-hour battery.
Which is cool when you think about it. They doubled the size of the battery and yet didn't change the car, because the car is built on this kind of unique platform that is, it's not carbon fiber, it's like carbon plastic.
Yeah, it's got this reinforced monocoque. That's this crazy woven material. It's a really kind of an ugly-looking little car, I think, but it's really nice on the inside. So it's got these interesting materials. It's got this really cool steering wheel and this floating central screen. I mean, it was a hugely expensive car for BMW to develop. Rear-wheel drive, fun to drive, super skinny tires, which are expensive.
Yeah, and they burn through quickly.
But it has an incredible turning radius. I think one of the best turning radiuses I've ever seen.
It's actually one of my favorite cars. I think it's, if not it's one of my favorite cars we've purchased this year, and we've purchased a lot of interesting vehicles, both used and new. And I'll tell you why I love it so much. It's just a really open and airy car. There's just a lot of room, especially in the front seat. I used to hate the clam-style doors, but I'm actually not bothered by them because you never get in the back seat. It's got room enough to put your bike in the back, which I've done. It's got enough range with the range extender where you don't really have to make range anxiety a thing, because if you keep your gas tank full, you can always drive it as far as you want to drive it.
Let's see what the range rating was according to the EPA.
Ours is like 150 with the battery and the range extender. So the battery goes like 80 miles and then the range extender goes like 70, and depending on if you're on a hill or something. There is a downside to it, and that is the little Kimco. Kimco's a Korean motorcycle manufacturer. Why BMW didn't use their own motorcycle engine, I am still baffled by, but they didn't. If you're on a hilly area, or if you're someplace where you're going to need a lot more power, then the little Kimco doesn't do enough to keep it fully charged, and it slows down a lot. So we're going to be doing a Loveland trials with it, but I can tell you, going up Loveland Pass, we were doing 16 miles an hour floored.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Extender. That was terrifying.
So the i3, the one we have, the 14 with the range extender, was rated at 72 miles on all electric. And then you had another 78 if you got the gas engine.
Yeah.
The new i3, if you get the full electric, can go 153 miles. Mm. So, but they get expensive. So the new ones get much more expensive than the old ones.
They're like 50K cars. And the used ones actually aren't expensive. So we bought ours for $12,500, which was really on the low end of things. The nicer ones that have the like we don't have, for instance, adaptive cruise control. We don't have the cool bamboo. We don't have like a second cup holder. There's a lot of little features. We don't have the bigger screens. Some have smaller screens. Some have bigger screens. And those can be anywhere from like 15 to 19, depending on which one you get. But still, 12.5 to 19,000 for a car that originally cost 50,000 not that long ago is pretty darn good. And you do have the issue where the electric motor is pretty bulletproof, but then you've got to deal with all the mechanical stuff that you would have in a gasoline-powered motor.
If you get the range extender. So you see the ones I'm looking at.
It's called a Rex, by the way, Tommy. The Rex.
The ones I'm looking at on Auto Trader are like 10 grand.
Yeah,
but those are
the Rex.
those are the full electric, and those are less desirable because they can only go, I think, 81 miles when they were new. And then some of the later ones with the Rex are going to be, like you said, 15 to maybe 20 for a really a much newer one.
I would highly recommend it. I love the car.
They were also available with adaptive cruise control and this crazy wooden dashboard and these bamboo dashboards, and they had this cool sunroof thing with these little panels. So shop around for one you like, because they're definitely out there, and they are out there for not a lot of money. Probably one of the best ones on the list.
And you know why they're out there?
Why is that?
Because people lease them, right? People don't want to buy like yesterday's tech. So a lot of people, especially a $50,000 vehicle, you just lease the thing. Same thing with a lot of these other California compliance cars. You lease them for 3 years, then you return them, and then they're out there for you to buy much more cheaply than new. And
this was not a compliance car, by the way. This was a full up, ground up EV for the entire nation.
And I want to say this is the last year in production of the vehicle.
It's dead. I think they're killing it. Yep, that's right.
It's built in its own plant in Leipzig.
So the i3 is rear-wheel drive. The next car on our list is front-wheel drive. We're back to the full electrics. It's probably one of my favorite on this list. It is the Volkswagen E-Golf.
You know what's crazy about the E-Golf? Volkswagen has just come out with their full electric vehicles, right? The ID. E-Golf is also fully electric, but they're new ground-up electric vehicles, the ID3 and the ID4.
Yeah.
And they're building the E-Golf alongside the ID3 at the same time. So they're still building the E-Golf while they're building the ID3.
Because there was a huge amount of demand for the E-Golf. Even still, it's a great car. It's based on the Mark 7 Golf. And, that's not a bad thing because the Golf is already such a fun car to drive, and when you electrify it, it just becomes even more fun. So it's, in my experience, it feels quicker on the road than a GTI, just because you have that instant torque. The modern ones could go about 125 miles. They had a 35.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack. They changed them partway through the production run. The earlier ones could only do about 83 miles.
How about fast charging?
They had optional DC fast charging.
Okay.
Yep, CCS. I actually took ours to Electrify America to try it out, and it did work. It's pretty quick.
I knew they got pretty expensive. You can get those things up to like $40,000 easily.
They're really expensive.
Yeah.
We did a Loveland trial with ours too, and if you remember right, one of the advantages of the E-Golf is it has something called a heat pump on the higher trims,
right?
Which is great for cold weather because rather than running a traditional heater, you use this little thing called the heat pump, which saves huge amounts of electricity. So if you live in the winter or in cold weather environments, the E-Golf, the newer ones, especially with heat pump, are much more efficient.
So, we have to talk about tax credits. When you buy a new electric car, depending on the company, they still have their federal and state tax credits. But let's talk about the E-Golf because that's a good one, right? Volkswagen still has much of their tax credit. And that tax credit is $7,500 federally, and then it drops off once they get to a certain number sold. So you might be wondering, why buy a used one? But if you do the math, right, so let's say you're getting an E-Golf, and you get in Colorado, you would get $3,000 plus $7,500, so you're like at $10,500. So at $40,000, the thing becomes a $30,000 car. That's a bargain, but a $12,000 BMW i3 or a $7,000 Fiat 500e is still a lot cheaper without tax credits.
So what do you think they go for used?
I don't know. They're pretty new. They haven't been around as long as some of the other ones.
I think the first year was 16.
Yeah, so I'm sure they're. I don't know. This one, I have no clue. So tell me.
10,000 on the low end.
Wow.
So 10.5, 10.9, 11, around that range. You can get a bunch of them. 83 miles on the older ones, so they couldn't go as far as the newer ones, but they're just so fun to drive. Strongly recommend the E-Golf.
So I'm going to draw. I love the car, but I'm going to draw a line. I think it's really much better to push a car than to pull a car. And so I never understood why you'd have front-wheel drive electric cars and not rear-wheel drive. And the reason for that usually is that the manufacturers didn't do a ground-up design, right? They just took an existing platform and electrified it. So to me, if you do a ground-up design, you're going to make it rear-wheel drive because it's, like I said, better to push than to pull. front wheels aren't doing two things, steering and pulling. And so I love the way like the i3 drives or, our smart car drives just because they're electric cars. And front wheel drive cars with a lot of torque, dude, it's fun, but it's not like a burnout. It's, it's a lot of torque steer.
Although I was talking to the Hyundai engineers about this, and they said front-wheel drive in a lot of cases is better.
Yeah, because you get more regen on the front.
Yeah, you can regen more, because keep in mind, like when you're braking, most of the braking power comes in front. Same thing with the regen, so that's what they'll tell you. So, okay, so far we are at 6. So the Spark EV, the 500e, the Model S, the i3, and e-Golf.
Yep.
None of these vehicles really seem to suffer much, if any, range degradation. They typically hold up very well. Do your homework, but they typically hold up very well.
The next one is not the case.
Then the next one I don't love, but I put on the list because
Nathan just bought it.
Yeah, it's the best-selling vehicle EV.
It was.
Yes, it was. I think Model 3
surpassed it. Yeah.
Surpassed. That's of course the Nissan Leaf. Now, funny enough, Nissan Leaf, first model year 2011. That was a ground-up EV. Can you believe that?
And they made it front-wheel drive.
Yeah,
what were you thinking, Nissan? And you didn't give it a frunk. Why?
They didn't base it on another vehicle. And Leafs...
I've heard they have, actually. I was talking to Alex. He said that I had this same discussion, and he said they based it on a global platform.
Weird. I read that it was an all ground-up thing.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. And then he said, no, think about it. It's much cheaper, and so that's why it's front-wheel drive. It was based on a front-wheel drive platform that's shared with other cars.
Well,
that's
I didn't
what
know
Alex
that.
said. And Alex knows his stuff, so Alex, I trust you.
Alex Dykes and Alex and Autos, by the way. So the Leaf is a little bit more problematic. These ones, you do see some pretty serious range degradation.
Yeah, the reputation is, the batteries, unlike a lot of these cars, aren't climate controlled, right? So they're just regularly air cooled. Kind of like the difference between like a water cooled and an air cooled engine, right? With an air cooled engine, you don't have to have the same tolerances that you do in a water cooled engine, and you don't get the same performance. With air cooled batteries, they tend to degrade faster because when you have them in places like Arizona, they get super hot, or when you have them in places like Colorado, they get super cold. And batteries, you know this, Tom, you love to be about the same temperature that me and you love to be.
Yeah, so when they get really hot or really cold, they start having issues. And the issue with the Leaf, too, is they had CHAdeMO fast charging, and people would drive them in really hot places like Phoenix. The batteries would already be hot, and they'd try to slam a ton of power into them. A ton of energy into them, actually, and they would just they couldn't take it. So
I went on the launch of the first Leaf, and we were in Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
And the drive was like a 60-mile drive. And that first gen, I think, had like 70 miles of range, barely. And I wanted to go to the Jim Beam or one. There's like a very close to where Nissan headquartered, like a 60-mile round trip. There's a distillery. It might be Jim Beam or it might be what's another famous Kentucky whiskey.
Oh, you're asking the wrong person, Dave.
Yeah, it wasn't Jim Beam. It was Jack Daniels. Yeah, so I wanted to go to the Jack Daniels distillery, and they said, nope, too far. I'm like, dude, it's 60 miles. I'm like, nope, too far. And then I realized, once again, it didn't have enough range. And at that time, Nissan had this marketing thing that they were trying to sell to people, and that was that they said the average American drives like 30 miles round trip to and from work, so 60 miles is plenty. And that turned out to be a bunch of dog dooey.
I mean, I still think this is plenty of range for most people.
Horse dooey?
73 miles.
Cow dooey?
According to the EPA, 73 miles of range. And, I mean, the frustrating thing about the Leaf is it was never really 73. It was kind of...
60.
Yeah, it was more like 60. So, like, our Smart Car was rated at 68, but it'll do 80 pretty easily. The Leaf was much lower than that. But they did improve it. So the early ones had a 24 kilowatt-hour battery. But you can see by 2016, the first-gen Leaf had jumped up to a 30 kilowatt-hour battery. So the later ones, I think, had 107 miles of range. That's the one Nathan bought. But they still had the air-cooled batteries. Some of them were available without the fast charging.
And those batteries are warranted, and there is a way when you have a Leaf to check what the battery status is.
It's really easy. So if you look at the Leaf, they have a gauge that tells you the current charge.
Yep.
But then next to the gauge, there's these little bars. And the little bars tell you the health of the battery. And I think full, look this up to be sure, but full they had, I think, 12 bars. And then if you drop below...
Now, this is not their range. This is just how much degradation has taken place.
So they had 12 little bars to show the health of the battery. And if you drop below 8 bars, I
They
want to say.
replaced it. It was under warranty.
Yeah, and I think it was like an 8-year warranty. You have to look all this up, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Yeah, once again, like the Spark, it's just one ugly car, dude. The newest one I think is better. So, and it's got a lot more range. If you get a new Leaf, they finally figured it out after 10 years of trying. But those early cars, they're just. And the other thing about the Leaf, which also is a shame, and some of these cars suffer from it, and that is, the great thing about electric batteries is instant torque, right? So, like Tesla's was very quick car, 0 to 60 in, well, if the Model S, you can do it in 2.3 in ludicrous mode, right? But in a lot of these cars, they dial that way down, and so you don't have the fun of actually having all that quickness. You just have a vehicle that is as slow as, an economy car with the range of, a third of an economy car. So you start to wonder what the value is in that vehicle.
The Spark EV, though, did not have that lack of fun. So the Leaf is pretty slow, but the Spark EV was really fun. How much do you think Leafs cost?
Well, they're the cheapest of the electric cars. You can get a Leaf. If you shop around, you could probably get one. If you get the wrong year, you could probably get it for under $5. But if you want the right year where the battery degradation wasn't as bad, these are the later models, then it could be anywhere from $8, $7 to I think $12,000, maybe $14. The newer they are, the more they cost.
Yeah, I'm looking at 11s, and they're $3 to $4,000, but typically those need new batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're spending 8 or 9. That's probably more in the market of where you should be spending.
And they're very practical, and they also have this cool thing where their navigation is tied to the range. So when you look at the little navigation screen, it draws a circle around the area that shows you your range. It's kind of a guess gauge, right? Tesla does it much better. Tesla, you plug in the navigation where you're going, and if you're coming home, it'll tell you exactly, and it will get it right, how much battery you'll have when you get to your destination and how much battery you'll have when you get home. The Leaf just kind of says, here's a circle, this is kind of how far you can go, and don't go beyond that circle because you'll be out of power.
Okay, so here we go. So this is exactly what you don't want. I'm looking at one right now.
Yeah.
On the I'm looking at one on Auto Trader right now.
Yeah.
It's an 11,
right.
$4,588, but it has 4 bars of battery life remaining.
So it probably has a effective range of 30 miles.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right now, if you look at this indicator, it's almost full. It's reading 13 miles.
Ouch.
So that car is essentially mechanically totaled because a new battery would be more than the value of the car.
I remember saying a new battery pack for a Leaf is $2.5K. I want to say, because remember, they're not using,
I think it's much more than that.
I don't think so. They're pretty basic batteries. They're not air-cooled.
I thought someone wrote me the other day and said it was 8.5.
Really? For a Leaf battery pack?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yep.
Well, you could be right. I thought it was 2.5. I didn't think there was.
I think it's. I mean, for a while they were $30,000.
Yeah, for sure.
So here we go. Spending $8,000 on a new battery pack. Yeah.
At that point, get yourself a 500E.
All right. So I wouldn't recommend the Leaf. But next up, we have the Focus Electric. How much do you think?
Well, I would recommend a Leaf, just not the early ones.
Get a 16 or newer. Yeah. Focus Electric. How much do you think a Focus Electric
is? I don't know
is?
anything about Focus Electrics except that Jay Leno used it on his show a long time ago, I know nothing about. I hated the car then. I hate it now. I just thought it was, kind of a swing and a miss on the part of Ford at the time. I'm hoping that the Mach-E is a much better electric car. So how much are they?
Well, people like Focus Electrics.
Okay, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, they're front-wheel drive still, but they are more usable. Okay. So a lot of these cars are really small and super efficient.
What's the range on them?
76 to 115 miles.
Okay.
The 2018s had more range.
Front-wheel drive, right.
Up to 33.5 kilowatt hours. They were pretty quick.
Yeah.
They had an optional fast charger as well. And they're more expensive than you'd think.
Okay.
They're for most of the time, they're 10 to 12K. Okay, maybe 9K in some cases. But they didn't make many of them.
Yeah.
So they were kind of low volume. Initially, the pilot program, I think, was only in 19 cities across the U.S., but I think they're cool. I really do think they're cool.
I think I didn't like the Focus because there was an ST, right? And there was an RS, and I thought to myself...
But there was a Fiat 500 Abarth.
Yeah, there was.
That's the same kind of deal.
Yeah, but I always kind of longed after an ST or an RS, and the electric just seemed not to, have the performance of any of those two cars. But like I say... Yeah, I don't know.
They're pretty zippy.
I don't have a lot to add to this
Yeah,
conversation.
they're pretty zippy, and they're very normal, so some of these EVs are all weird and funky, but the Focus
Yeah,
is
that was
just...
another thing. I like my EVs to be unique and quirky.
Yeah, they were just normal little cars.
They were like they stuck a battery in a Focus and called it, an electric Focus. That's fine, but at least with some of these other cars, they actually went to the trouble of, with like the i3, completely designing a ground up electric car, or even with the Fiat, taking something that was kind of charming and cute and actually putting some more design language into it than just sticking a battery into it.
The next car on our list is also funky, if you're into funky cars. It is the Soul EV.
Yeah, the Soul EV. I actually, once again, I went to launch on that, and I was a little disappointed in that car because I felt like they had traded utility for fun, but that's just me. It had actually a greater range than most of those compliance cars at the time, so I want to say it was in the 90s. Am I wrong?
Yeah, 93 miles for 16 and 17, and then the 18 and 19s were up to 111.
Yeah, so it had more utility. It's got all the kind of goodness of a Soul, all your hamster-loving people out there. It had all that quirky, funny kind of design language. And what makes the Soul so such a hot seller, right? It's one of their best-selling vehicles, if not the best-selling vehicle, is it's just in that sweet spot of usability, right? It's not expensive, and yet it's got a ton of utility, and yet it's got a ton of character, and you put all that together, and it's a really cool car. And I just felt that they should have made it a little quicker. So I remember driving it around SoCal thinking to myself, I just want the torque, and this didn't have a lot of torque.
Yeah, it was not a fast electric car, but very practical. And nowadays they're like, I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to say they're probably 8 to 12.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly in the area. Air-cooled batteries, unfortunately. I don't know how they've held up over time. I'd have to do some more digging into that one.
So our friend Alex from Alex on Autos, Alex Dykes, he had one leased for a couple of years. So if you look at his YouTube channel, I'm sure he's got some great reviews of it. If you're serious about buying it and you want a kind of a buyer-style review and not kind of a more enthusiast review, that would be a place I would certainly look.
They did have available fast charging. I don't know if it was standard or if it was available, but there was CHAdeMO, 81 kilowatt motor, so not really that quick.
How big is the battery?
30.5 kilowatt hours or 31.8, depending on the year.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, pretty big.
Yeah.
All right, number 2 on our list is the longest range of them all.
The longest range of them all.
Of all the ones we're talking about. Longer than the Tesla Model S60.
Wow. I'm completely flummoxed.
It's a car we've been supposed to be getting for the last month now.
Oh, the Bolt. Mm-hmm. Oh, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Yeah, the Bolt. Oh gosh, the Bolt. We've got a new Corvette sitting just beyond the camera and the mics, and we just did a track review of it, and we were both blown away by just the amount of engineering prowess that Chevy and GM put into that vehicle, right?
Yeah.
It was just, it's just got so much cool tech, so much just serious engineering, and I felt like when that thing rolled out at the Detroit Auto Show, like they were pulling a fast one on us. I saw that car and I was expecting the car of the future from GM, because let's face it, GM has probably got the longest history of electric car development with the EV1, right?
Oh, yeah.
Than any other company in the world. And this little boxy electric car comes out, and I was like, no, that can't be it. Where's the Jetsons car? Where's the afterburners? And then it wasn't. It was just an economy car that had a big battery that got 230 miles of range, that had little graphics that drew, little leaves, I think it was, or something like that showed you that you were being ecologically sound. Had a kind of funky interior, but in general, the car, why not take on Tesla directly? Why go the economy car route?
Because it was supposed to be affordable. This was
but it
GM's
wasn't
attempt.
affordable.
It was mid-30s.
You seen those things? They were mid-40s at one point.
Well, now you can get them for much less than that. And
so what are the numbers on it?
If you want an affordable electric car with 238 miles of range, this is really good. It's huge battery capacity. 17 through 19s had a 60 kilowatt hour battery, pretty quick, 200 horsepower, good range, not much of a looker. It was monstrously expensive, I think, for them to develop, because this is another one that I don't think shares too much with other vehicles in their lineup. It's not just like a Spark that they stuck some batteries in. Pricing, they're more expensive. So on the low end, maybe 14, 13, you can probably get, there's a ton of them in the 13, 14 range. So that's kind of where they live on the low end. But it's pretty fun to drive. More fun than the Leaf. They certainly go a lot further than the Leaf. They're just, they're not much to look at. And I don't think, I'd love to race a Bolt versus a Spark EV. I think that'd be really fun.
I was just thinking about that. I'd love to drag race like all these together. Just put them on a big airplane strip. You know how Motor Trend used to do their like greatest drag race? This would be really cool. Just put them all and see which one will win. And I can tell you the Tesla will win.
Yeah, so even the Model S 60 was like 5.5 seconds. All right, number one on our list is my favorite car. I love this little guy.
Yeah, and Tommy put this as number one. I would not put this as number one, so I'm just going to do a little, buyer beware here, a little caveat to this list. This is Tommy's favorite car. He's fallen in love with it. What is it, Tommy? Drum roll, please.
Yes, it is the Smart Electric because it is the most fun you can have for $6,000 or $7,000. They are super cheap. The battery tech was pretty good for the year. Yeah. The batteries don't degrade. They are really surprisingly quick. You can take pretty much anything on the road. They are just so easy to park. I have more fun driving this car than I do.
Back it up into a parking space.
Yeah, you can. I have more fun driving the Smart EV than I do the new Corvette.
Look, I'll give you I'm not making fun of the car. It is a cool little car. It's rear-wheel drive. One caveat for all of you guys who are thinking about getting a Smart EV, don't get the current generation. It actually has less range for some mysterious reason why Mercedes engineers decided, Hans, the next generation Smart, we would give it less battery and less range while everybody else is giving it more battery and more range. How they came around to that conclusion, I don't know. So you want it to be the second generation in the world, the first generation in America, because the very first generation didn't come to America.
I think 68 miles of range.
What year are those?
Yeah, 68 miles of range they proved was too much range.
Too much range. Yeah, that's too much, Hans.
I think, I don't know the exact year. I think
ours
it was...
What? Ours is 2015?
Yeah.
So ours is one of the later ones, right? So 2010 to 2015 is the second gen. You can
Wikipedia. I think it's 13 was the first year.
It's got a glass roof. You can get them as a convertible, a cabriolet.
Yes, you can. They're rear-wheel drive. They are incredibly zippy. I just love them. And the batteries are awesome on them, so you very rarely see degradation on the Smart Electrics. Because A, they don't have any fast charging. They charge very slowly.
They do.
But
how fast? Like 6?
3.3.
Oh, gee, that's
It's
slow.
still level 2, but it's barely level 2. You can still, because the battery is only 17.6 kilowatt hours, you can easily charge it overnight. But, yeah, I mean... I think they're underrated. Some of these cars are overrated. The Leafs, you'll never see 70.
We actually tuned ours. We bought a box.
You will never see.
They gave it to us.
You will never see 73 miles
Who makes that tuning box? You remember who the company was? I want to give them a plug since they gave it to us.
Steinbauer.
Thank you, Steinbauer, for your tune. And it actually made it quicker. Not a lot. It took it from 10 seconds, 0 to 60 to 9 seconds. But still, not bad. I have one caveat, and this is just nothing to do with the engineering. It's just the nature of the car. It's got a very short wheelbase, and so you will feel every bump in the thing.
Yeah, it's not exactly smooth. It doesn't carry a whole lot, but it's big enough for someone who's 6'3".
It's incredibly big. I mean, you can move that seat all the way back, and it's definitely one of the quirkiest cars ever, not just one of the quirkiest electric cars.
So pricing is 6 to 8 or 9, maybe 5, depending on.
I love the yellow, the Tweety. It's really cool.
Yeah, and you see some of these every now and then. So there was a Pilot. I don't know what the deal was. I got to look into it, but there's a car sharing program called GoCar.
Yeah, and they got a bunch of them and then never used them, and they're for sale
with no miles. This one is, I think,
they're all white too.
1,400 miles. They're all white. They all have steel wheels, as far as I know. I'd get a higher mileage one that's privately owned because I don't know. I just like it. But look at this green one, green and black. It's so cool. $6,900. They're all low mileage. 28,000 miles.
The best thing about a smart car is, Tommy?
What?
We've got it parked here in our garage, and we've got a garage space for 6 vehicles in our studios.
Oh yeah, they fit.
You could just if you have a place for a lawnmower in your garage, the smart car will just slot in right there.
Heated seats were available.
We're available, yeah.
Yeah, paddle shift regenerative braking was available to adjust the amount. Yeah, great cars, love them.
Yeah. I mean, so let me ask you, if you had to pick one of those cars on the list, which one would you buy?
I would pick the car I put number 1. Ooh, it might be close between. Well, I think the Model S is probably the coolest, but that's also mid-20s. Yeah. That's easily $10,000 more than the cheapest car on our list. So I think Smart. I really do. I love that little guy.
Okay, what if you need a back seat?
Probably the E-Golf.
Okay, fair enough. I would pick, no doubt, the i3. I've really like clicked with that car. I just, it's funny because when we first had it, when we had a couple of them now, I thought this is the stupidest, goofiest car out there. It didn't feel BMW-like, mainly because the tires and wheels are like pizza cutters, right? So if you look at them from the side, they're really cool, but if you look at them, like if you turn them and you see that they're only like 2.5 inches wide, then you're like, this looks silly. And when you turn them, you see all the like suspension components. And I thought, this is not proper BMW. I want a car with like 22s and big exhaust. And now that I've actually kind of gotten into the mindset of the BMW engineers, I think it's a really cool car, and I think they give it a lot of thought. They put a lot of money into it. I wish they had actually done something a little bit more dramatic in terms of the powertrain with the i8. Right, as opposed to putting just a 3-cylinder mini engine into it and a small battery. I wish they'd actually gone like all electric with the i8 and used some of the tech that they put in the i3 and the i8. I like the i3 a lot. Yeah.
Range is good. Interior is awesome. It's a little numb. The driving experience is a little numb, and it does a horrible thing where it's sort of quick. Like the BMW engineers...
It's funny. It's quick after like 25 miles an hour.
It could be much quicker, but BMW purposely did this crazy, slow initial throttle thing.
Yeah, so if you graph the throttle response, it's like nothing, and then all of a sudden it goes up.
Have you tried accelerating hard and accidentally hit like an expansion joint?
What happens, though?
It feels like you're going to explode.
Really?
Like something with the really skinny tires, it goes... It's like alarming. So I wish they'd put normal wheels and tires on it.
I like just the openness of the car, right? There's really no, it just feels like you're...
Tweedy's open. Tweedy has a glass roof.
Tweedy, me and you are like an inch apart when we sit in Tweedy because it's so narrow.
But they designed it so that the one seat sits further back than the other.
Yeah, so you don't like rub shoulders.
It's a great design. I love Tweedy.
Anyway, there is your list of the top 10 budget, bargain, affordable electric cars. You know which ones we would recommend. I think this is a great time to be electric car shopping because all these cars have been completely and utterly devalued and depreciated to the point where you don't have to go in debt to get one of these, and they won't, for the most part, break because electric motors don't really break. The battery degradation hasn't been such a big deal, and so if you're looking for something ultimately reliable, I think you'd be hard pressed than to get an electric car. I know there are people out there like Scotty Kilmer, get a Toyota. It's not that simple, right? And hopefully you guys understand that we're not just kind of talking through our hats. We're actually doing this from experience. We're buying these cars, we're living with them, and we're giving you our honest and most I think informed opinion as opposed to just trying to get clicks to get you to watch or listen to our podcast.
Well, so there you have it.
I'll get off. That was a Roman rant, by the way.
Check out TFLcar.com for the latest and greatest in new and used EV reviews.
Yep, and see you guys next time. We'll have another fun list for you. Or what do we do next week, Tommy? Any ideas?
I have no idea. We'll figure it out.
Well, we've got the Corvette here. It might be a whole Corvette show.
All right. See you next time.
Ciao.